Hi, my name's Andrew Mellor and I'm on faculty here at Alpha Crucis College. I am really looking forward to talking to you about what makes a great Master of Ceremony, or MC for short. So I've been an MC many times, weddings, church services, large events, and I want to focus on what I think is one of the most dynamic and exciting forms of public speaking. The role of an MC is very unique. You have to be able to think on your feet. You need to be able to change your tone, change your energy levels, and you need to be able to adapt to the audience. Not only that, but there's a constant move between the foreground and the background as the MC. This cycle actually happens many times during an event. Not only is the role dynamic, however, but it's also a role where you need to be ready for the unexpected. You might need to entertain a crowd briefly while a speaker prepares their notes. You might need to adjust to an unexpected drop, maybe after the lunch session. You need to adjust to that unexpected drop of energy and really bring everybody back to really get ready for the next session. You might need to do a quick public relations repair job when a speaker bombs it. So I think that the MC role is actually one of the most exciting roles to take in public speaking. Finally, the MC role actually has a lot of different identities depending on the kind of event that you're MCing. You could be the church MC, the conference MC, the wedding MC, the product launch MC, the award ceremony MC. The list goes on and on and on, and each of those roles really takes a different form and requires a slightly different style. Now, I've often heard it said that an MC needs to blend into the background, not take the attention away from, the speakers and the events that are occurring during the day, not draw attention to themselves. And then others will talk about an MC like they're meant to be the star of the show, like they're meant to take the attention and get everyone's focus on them. And you see, I think both of these are half-truths. I'm sure you've been to a wedding or something similar, and you've wished you just had a brick in your back pocket, just so you could throw it at that MC that won't shut up, that won't be quiet and actually let the real stars, the bride and groom, be the stars. They just keep going with banter and bad jokes, and it's almost like they think we came to the reception to hear them talk. On the other hand, you've probably also been subjected to the awkward MC, the MC that almost feels like they're not meant to be seen. So you're not sure what's going on, you're not sure what's happening next. It's kind of like you just wish there just wasn't an MC. Things just move from one thing to the next. The MC almost makes things more confusing. You see, during an event, the MC is in a constant cycle of moving from the foreground to the background. The best way to think about it is if we had a spotlight and the MC is metaphorically drawing that spotlight to themselves so that the audience knows exactly who to focus on, them. So it's actually completely appropriate for the MC to be the center of attention because the MC is basically setting up the audience to know what's happening next so they can anticipate and participate in the next section that is to come. They make the audience feel at ease. They basically remove any confusion and uncertainty, as well as providing just a really positive atmosphere for the audience to be in. So it's completely appropriate for the MC to draw that attention. However, as the next section approaches, we get to the segue point. And during this point, it's like the MC is using all that attention to slowly move that metaphorical spotlight onto the next section. So that might be the next speaker. It might be a worship set in a church service. It might be, the cutting of a cake in a wedding. It can be different every time, but they use all that attention to highlight that the metaphorical spotlight is moving. And then they put the next section or the next person completely in that spotlight. And then they drift into the background and become invisible for a time. But then, sure enough, as the event continues, they then come again to the foreground as they segue out of one section into the next. So it's actually a lie to say that the MC should always be in the background, as just as much it's a lie to say the MC should always be in the foreground. The truth is an MC is constantly moving in and out in a cycle. All right, so next I want to move to before an event. And the truth is that an MC's job starts well before the event starts. Some events are regular and you might become very familiar with, in which case the prep that's required for them is minimal each time. But for most events, you actually need to do a fair bit of research to be well prepared. So in doing that research, one of the key things is to talk to all the key stakeholders. You really want to understand what do they want to achieve from the event. Not only that, but what do they want to achieve from each section in the event. This will determine the energy that you bring, the tone, the demeanour. You can also gauge things like timekeeping. How important is it to those stakeholders that you keep to, the exact run sheet that you've been given with that exact time? Usually it's very important, and the default should always be go with the time, go with the run sheet. But sometimes it's not. One example of that might be an informal church service where there's more time to respond to God. And you don't want that time constraint. But most of the time, you do want to follow that run sheet very clearly. You also want to check out, are there any no-go zones? You need to check with your stakeholders, are there any things that you should not mention, any jokes you should not enter into? That's a big tip and something that I remind you to always check. Okay, so not only do you want to check with the key stakeholders and organisers of the event, but you also want to find out who are going to be the key groups within your audience. It's rare that an audience is just a completely homogenous group of people. If it initially appears they are, a closer inspection will reveal at the very least that the group may be made up of the old establishment, people who've been, regularly at, say, these business conferences, and those who are newcomers. And then in other situations, like a wedding, you've got a very diverse range of groups within the larger audience. It's essential that you think through how are you going to communicate to each of those groups. Knowing who your key audience is will make sure that you don't isolate or alienate people who are in the audience, and that they each feel like they're appropriately being addressed. Another key thing before the event is to plan your opening carefully. Now, the great thing about being an MC is that a lot of what you do when you're in front of people is to some extent spontaneous. You get to respond to both what the previous section was about, what the speaker had to say, what the theme was, and you get to think on your feet and respond to that. You get to respond to the energy coming from the audience. There's a lot of fun in that. But the opening, you're starting from a cold start, and you need to really think through how are you going to bring the energy needed so that you have the momentum and the event has the momentum it needs to pull it into the right direction as you go forward. So think through your opening. Get the opening right. If you get the opening right, you're going to feel a lot more comfortable going forward during the event. And finally, go over the run sheet that you're either given or you may have to construct it yourself. But go over it with a fine-tooth comb. Make sure every minute's accounted for. And if you see a discrepancy, talk to the organisers. Make sure they know that something doesn't seem quite right. Because at the end of the day, it's going to look like your responsibility when you're in front of everyone and the timing goes way off. Okay, so moving to the during phase, during the event. Obviously, I can't comment on particulars of a run sheet. Every event's unique, and I'm not going to list all the things that an MC may be required to do during an event. However, there's some general principles that I want to cover and guide you through as you MC an event. Firstly, going back to those key groups in the audience, you want to welcome each of those key groups. Now, don't go down to minutiae. You could probably invent 100 different groups within your audience. I'm talking maybe 2 or 3 max. But make sure that you acknowledge each of them. Now, there will be some situations where you may need to acknowledge more. You may be at a conference where there may be quite a few businesses represented, and you might need to actually acknowledge each of them. So you might have 10 or more businesses to acknowledge in that situation. But again, make sure that nobody is alienated. Acknowledge each group that is present. Make special guests feel appreciated. So now we're talking about the VIPs. They may be the speakers, if they happen to be in the audience at that time, or other very important people that without them being there, the conference just wouldn't be the same. So make sure you mention them, make them feel special, and make them feel appreciated. Remember that the MC is in a cycle, as I've already mentioned, moving from the foreground to the background and back to the foreground. When it's time for you to be in the foreground, get their attention. That is your job. If you don't, the audience is going to be confused about what their role to play is and how they should respond to what's coming up in the event. It's your job to help the audience participate and anticipate. If they don't anticipate what's coming, they're not going to be able to participate properly. So take the audience on a journey with you and enjoy it. Enjoy taking them and enjoy helping them maximize their experience at the event that you're emceeing. Now, second key thing in relation to this is it's your job to generate enthusiasm or whatever tone is appropriate to that section of the event. The audience will actually follow your lead. You're in control as far as that goes. This requires you to be sensitive to what kind of energy is needed at that point in the event. A church service is an excellent example where high levels of energy may not be appropriate for every section during the church service. For instance, there may be a reflective point during the service where you want to bring a tone that actually calms people down. So don't assume that high energy is always the right energy. However, you do need to assume that whatever you're bringing to your demeanour up the front, that's what the audience is going to feed off, and that's how they're going to respond. Now, it's your job to smooth over problems, so people either don't know that there was a problem, or they know there was a problem, but it was no big deal. They know that there was a problem, but it's sorted. Everything's under control. They don't need to worry. Essentially, it's your job to make sure the audience doesn't feel worried. Too often, an MC will get nervous and actually draw attention to the problem or the issue that's going on. Usually they do that by being overly apologetic. Don't. There is no need to be overly apologetic as an MC. It's normal for at least one or a few things to go wrong during a major event. If it's appropriate, have a quick laugh and move on to the next section. On with the show. Occasionally there will be a major delay that does require a little bit more from you as an MC. Usually it's sufficient to simply be very clear with the audience and tell them that a delay is in progress. You may be able to explain in very simple terms what's going on, and simply tell them that the program will resume as soon as possible, and you'll let them know when that's happening. And you can tell them in the meantime, feel free to have a chat, go get a refreshment, take a break. You'll let them know when things are ready to start again. I don't recommend that you aim to entertain the crowd. That can be a real overstretch unless you're a really good performer. If you're very confident that the issue will be resolved within a time frame before your material runs out, and you're very confident at doing that sort of entertainment, then great, go for it. But usually, I recommend that you don't try to entertain the crowd. Just be very clear, let them know what to expect, let them know they don't need to worry, and that they can enjoy themselves in the meantime, and you'll call them back together as soon as things are ready to progress. And with that, stick with the run sheet. Remember that generally you are the timekeeper as well. This means being a little nasty sometimes and being the one that signals for a speaker to wrap up. No one likes to be that guy, but it's important for the event as a whole. So stick to your run sheet. And then finally, close the meeting. Generally, this needs to just be a concise but very clear closing. Thank speakers, thank sponsors, thank key stakeholders. Let the audience know of any subsequent events that they may be interested in, and thank them heartily for their participation. If it's a regular event, don't go overboard. But if it's a once-a-year event, you may want to mention the event next year and really thank them heartily for their involvement. Okay, now I want to talk to you about the secret sauce of improvement as an MC. And that actually happens after the event. Usually, after an event, we're thinking our job's done. We probably just want to go have a hot shower and chill out. But at some point, probably not immediately after the event, but maybe the next day, it's really important to take some time to reflect. You see, reflection is the secret sauce to improvement in any area of life. And too often we just move from one event to the next event, not thinking how we could improve our performance, whatever it may be. And certainly this applies to emceeing. So what I would recommend is that you take some time to get some feedback from people who are there. It might be people that you trust and really respond well, even if they give you a little bit of criticism. But then once you've got that feedback, take some time to reflect and think, how could I change in the future? What differences could I make to the way that I MC that event? And then resolve to make one or two changes the next time you MC. It's as simple as that. And sometimes you'll be surprised. In 15 minutes of reflection, you come up with something that will totally revolutionize the way that you do something. And I've found that with emceeing, just a little bit of reflection and making sure that I'm open to get feedback, that has led to constant improvements in my ability to MC. All right, I want to finish with a few tips and tricks that just help in any MC role that you might take. First up, make others feel special. Don't try to be the star. Make others the star. Now, this is not about the backwards and forwards of the MC cycle. This is all about the paradigm that you're working in as an MC. You are meant to be taking the attention at certain parts of any event that you MC, but that doesn't mean that you're the star. Get over yourself. You're not. Enjoy the role. Enjoy what you're doing. Enjoy helping the audience get the most out of what they're there for, and enjoy making others the stars. If you do that, people will probably think you're a bit of a star anyway. but make sure that that's not what you're there to do, trying to impress or try to make yourself the star. Enjoy making others the star and enjoy making a great experience for the audience. Having said that, enjoy your role. Enjoy the fact that you get to set the tone, embrace it. It is a bit of a rush to be at the front and see that the audience is responding to what you're bringing to the event. So enjoy that and relish those opportunities. But when it's time to shift that spotlight, shift it. Err towards less rather than more, particularly as you're developing. As you have more experience as an MC, you'll know when it's okay to go a little bit further with a joke or a bit of a gag, or whether you need to fill in the gaps with a little bit more of yourself. But if you're in doubt, go with less. You'll never regret that, and the event itself won't be worse for it. However, if you are on the side of more when you're not ready to bring more, the event can definitely suffer and you'll feel embarrassed. As I've already mentioned, don't overdo apologies. Things go wrong and you make gaffes. That's just normal. And people would rather see a real human side of you rather than a perfectly polished event. So don't apologise overly for messing up. Just get on with the show. Now, if you are finding it hard to know where to look while you're emceeing, just look slightly above the heads of those that you're speaking to. When you're in front of a big crowd, it can become overwhelming trying to look people in the eye. There's too many people to look at. It's kind of like when a train goes past and you try to look at the carriages and you just end up getting dizzy. Don't do it. Just look above the heads. For the audience, they'll feel like you're making connection with them, but it allows you to pan across the whole audience rather than getting distracted by looking individuals in the eye. Finally, I just want to mention that thinking on your feet is necessary as an MC. However, grow into it. It takes time and it takes experience. As I've said, err on the side of less rather than more. As you develop, though, relish the fact that you do get to think on your feet, that you get to be dynamic and spontaneous. However, that takes practice, and don't push yourself out there in a way that you're just not ready for yet. Learn to develop, learn to stick to the run sheet, and in time, you'll develop those abilities to think quickly on your feet and be a really dynamic MC. Well, thanks for your time. I've really enjoyed sharing with you some of the things that I've learned about MCing over the years. MCing is a real privilege. You really have a major impact on the way an audience experiences and enjoys an event. You really have a real impact on the way speakers feel appreciated and loved during an event. My encouragement for you is to keep practicing and really take to heart some of the principles that I've shared with you during this video. All right, that's it for me. Over and out.